All right. Hello, wonderful fish fans. Oop, left my door open there. Keep some of my obnoxious cats out of here. Thank you so much for joining us for our very informal discussion on pet fish nutrition. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, my name is Dr. Jessie Sanders. I am the owner and chief veterinarian of Aquatic Veterinary Services. We are an aquatic exclusive private mobile practice out here in California. I'm also one of the first 10 boarded fish veterinarians in the country right now, which is awesome for those both in our profession and those who are now able to serve a greater clientele base. Just again, we know what we're doing. We're actually legitimate professionals. So if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I have a long list of different things that we're going to talk about today. So if you do have any questions that come up, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. If you have any kind of specific questions about your one particular fish or some issue that you've been having, I will do my best to work with, at least in the limitations of what we can do kind of in a live YouTube stream. But we do offer telehealth consults as well. So I will be sure to share the link with all of you if you want just kind of a more in-depth journey into your fish's overall health and well-being, including their diet. So we're just going to start this with kind of a small caveat that a lot of the information that we have about pet fish nutrition is extrapolated from aquacultured species. So koi and goldfish kind of are that cross between aquaculture. But if you want to really get into the big fish nutrition guide, we have this lovely, very heavy, very thick textbook. But it doesn't get into a lot of the ornamental species, especially the warm water tropicals. So we're not able to provide specific instructions onto what their diet should be specifically, but we are able to give some good guidelines. So starting out our overall discussion with pellet food versus flake food. Now, way back in the day when I was a kid, you really only had flakes for indoor fish and pellets for outdoor fish. Well, I'm very thankful that technology has changed and the pellets available today are super tiny and small. And this is a really great benefit for super small fish, such as our tropicals or little baby tiny fish that are going to be growing up into big fish. So, looking at the surface area of a pellet versus a flake. So again, we have our pellet, our nice round ball, and our flake, which is very flat. So if we are thinking about the air that is surrounding a pellet versus a flake, there's a lot more contact with the air with a flake versus a pellet. So this is what we call our surface to mass ratio. So this flake and this pellet weigh the exact same amount, but this flake is going to have a lot more kind of contact with the environment, including the air that it kind of sits in its container and the water once you drop it into the water. So unfortunately, this means that our flakes lose a lot of their nutrition a lot faster just because they have a lot more air exposure. And our pellets will retain their nutrition because everything's kind of tucked away inside here. So when you are purchasing these from the fish store, they start with probably identical nutrition. But we go ahead and, again, we take our pellet, crush it down really flat. We end up with a flake that has a lot more surface area. So unfortunately, in the air, we have our our water-soluble vitamins, such as vitamin C and vitamin B, which are very important in your fish's overall nutrition. So having a lot of contact with the air and the water, again, anytime you open that container of food, you're going to let some air out from water out from evaporation. And with that, unfortunately, goes all of our lovely water-soluble vitamins. So unfortunately, flakes just do not hold on to their nutrition as well as pellets. And to be honest, most fish are probably a little big for them, especially I'm looking at you, our little 6 to 8 inch goldfish. These guys should not be eating flakes. They're going to get much better nutrition from a pellet. So again, they make pellets very small these days. So the best choice for your fish's overall nutrition and what's going to kind of last the longest is going to be a pelleted diet. Now, talking a little bit more about storage of fish food, and this is really important if you have a pond outside and you're bringing the food in and out. So first and foremost, your fish food should be stored inside. Even if you're storing small amounts outside, in that small amount of time, you can lose, again, those water-soluble vitamins B and C, which your fish really need for appropriate immune function. They're going to lose a lot more when that's exposed to a more varying temperature gradient, such as outside versus temperature stable inside. You also want to make sure it's stored in an airtight container. So again, they make this for other pet food for the most part. But for fish, again, if it's like a screw top container, that's fine. If it's a bag with the little Ziploc thing at the top, that's fine too. But if it's the bags that you just kind of roll closed, not really going to be the best option for your fish. We also recommend that you store it, in the cupboard with all of your food and your other pet's food versus out on the counter, exposed to light. It's just going to spoil that much faster. Now, studies have shown that most fish food, at least if it's stored properly, you're going to notice a significant loss in those water-soluble vitamins by about the 6-month mark. I know fish food has expiration labels on them. That is for the stores to know when the food's going to expire. Once it's open and stored properly, again, you get about 6 months out of it. If it is a flake diet, they're just going to degrade faster. So you're looking at that for about 3 months, which, again, depending on your fish, if they're going through a giant can of flakes that fast, they probably need to be on a little bit better diet. So again, make sure that your food is stored properly. If you do have a pond outside, you're going to have to keep bringing the food in with you. I know, awkward step, but it's really important to make sure that that food is retaining as much of its nutrition, and especially our water-soluble vitamins, as much as possible. So in looking at the label on any package of fish food, unfortunately, the requirements for pet food labeling, this is provided by AFCO. They are responsible for labeling all different pet foods. Unfortunately, the requirements for fish are very lax. So they're mostly just required to put on protein, fat, moisture, and ash. And that is the sole requirement on there. And again, they have all the ingredients listed as well. So in looking at, some companies will put on other things such as any sort of vitamin content, which we don't have standards for in fish. But it's really important to look at the protein and the fat content. So most pet fish maintenance protein requirements, we're talking koi and goldfish, is going to be roughly 28 to 32%. And again, this is what's been tested in these fish and extrapolated from aquaculture. If you go higher than this, you should expect to see more growth in your fish, which is perfectly appropriate if you have juvenile fish or you have other fish that you want to make more baby fish. They really need more protein in order to grow the testicles and the ovaries that they need in order to make more baby fish. But for most fish, once they've reached adult size, they really don't need that extra protein. So again, a lot of the diets that are commercially available, we've seen them 45, even 50%, basically just eating the biggest cheeseburger of your life, except you're a fish. You don't really do that much. So it can be a little bit problematic, and obesity is definitely a concern in pet fish species. Indoor and outdoor fish in tanks and ponds, these are the equivalent to indoor house cats. They don't do very much. They are cruising around their tank. They're cruising around their pond. Nothing's going to be chasing them. They live a very low activity lifestyle. So we really don't need to be pushing them full of protein to grow when there's especially a lot of tanks and ponds that are overstocked. So again, we're looking about 28 to 32% protein as a maintenance level for koi and goldfish. If you are a tropical fish or a fish that has a little bit difficulty swimming, so looking at our lovely little betta fish, they're very pretty. Their fins are not very helpful for swimming. They do their lovely little sculling motion here, which for any of you swimmers out there, sculling takes a lot more energy rather than just kicking your tail like this. So this is also the case for fancy goldfish that have to put up a little more effort. Either their tails are super long, they're a little hunched over bodies. Oh, that hurt my neck. So they're probably going to need a little bit more protein in their diet just because they are expending more calories to swim, to do their normal fishy thing. So again, that's going to be a little bit higher, between 30 and 35%. And it will certainly depend on the individual fish and what that fish environment looks like, what the temperature is specifically, because again, we're dealing with ectothermic animals. Their metabolism and immune function and reproductive effort is all going to be dependent on the temperature of the water surrounding them. So again, we'll talk about this a little bit specifically with koi, with them being outside, but this will also apply to any outdoor fish. So again, that's just the protein level. But if we move to the fat content as well, again, obesity is a big concern in some of our lovely little pet fish species. They're like the golden retrievers. We love feeding them, and we want to feed them our love. Well, unfortunately, some of these diets, especially some of the ones that we've seen with the bug protein specifically, have ridiculously high fat contents. I'm talking 10 to 12%, which is a lot for, again, a little indoor or outdoor fish that's not swimming around a lot. So fat content, if you are not in the process of growing or making more baby fish, it's going to be 7% to 3%. We really don't need to be pumping these fish full of fat, especially, again, if they're not growing, they're not making more fish. It's just going to sit around their bodies. And obesity is not fun for any species. So we have had cases of obese fish that actually had so much fat in their coelomic cavity that it started to coat their entire heart. So again, their heart in fish is going to be located pretty much right here underneath the chin. There's a separate pericardial sac that the heart will sit in. And again, fat's just going to coat the outside of the heart, which, as you can imagine, is not great for life in general. Your heart just can't beat to keep up with your swimming ability, and you just feel miserable. So again, make sure you pay specific attention to the protein and the fat in the diet. And again, it's going to depend on your fish, their environment, what their purpose in life is, to really determine what level that they need for those. Now, in looking at the ingredient list specifically, sometimes you might have to get a dictionary out for some of these terms. It's perfectly appropriate for them to put on either premixes of vitamins or minerals, but the protein sources should be listed out in name. Now, for fish, the best complete protein source is going to be fish meal, which sounds a little weird, fish eating other fish. But yes, that's exactly what they need in order to grow their own bodies big and strong. And out there in the wild, little fish comes along, you're going to eat it because that's a free meal sitting in front of you. Again, looking at our koi and goldfish, they eat a lot of stuff that comes along their path. Are they able to digest it to the extent that we're processing this food? Probably not. Their digestive system is very simple. They have molars in the back of their mouths. They're going to crush up the food or the pellets or the little fish or the clams or the bugs that they find. And it's going to enter their esophagus and pretty much just slowly go through the intestines as things are absorbed over time. Most pet fish species do not have an acidic stomach. So they can't break down bones or any sort of cartilage, and anything, that is not crunched up as best it can be is just going to exit the back the same way that it came in. So algae is another case for this. So a lot of people will see their fish eating algae and expect that to be enough sustenance for them overall. Well, again, the algae going in their mouths is going to come out the back exactly the same way it went in. But within those algae are all these delicious little crustaceans, bug larvae, and other tasty little things that your fish are actually going to get some actual decent nutrition out of versus these little strings that probably aren't going to be doing anything. They're not cows. They don't have rumens or with the lovely horses' hindgut fermenters. So again, it's really important that you kind of understand that they are going to need a little bit of supplementation when it comes to food. Pretty much all the tanks and ponds that we have are artificial systems that will need supplementation for your fish. So again, fish meal should be the first ingredient in your fish's diet. If it's not, it'll still be an adequate diet. These diets are all formulated to have all of the essential amino acids that are required, but it better be a cheaper diet because, again, you're paying for the good stuff. If you've looked at our other Decoding Fish Food Nutrition Labels webinar, we've kind of talked about this a little bit there. So you can go over there and make sure that you check out basically the more specifics on how to break down the individual pieces of the diet. So just one quick tip here. I know someone is going to bring up feeding peas for constipation, which is just complete hooey all around. Your freshwater fish cannot be constipated. It is physiologically impossible. So if we take our fish and we put it in water, through the simple process of diffusion, water is going to move into the fish's body because this body is more dense than the water around it. So yeah, water is moving into the fish. It is an active process of both the kidneys and the gills to remove the water from that fish's body so this doesn't swell up like a balloon, which can happen when they get dropsy and their kidneys shut down. So again, passive process to put the water in. It's an active process to remove it. So again, passive is going to win out over active. So this little fish is always just going to be a little bit super saturated with water. And if you are overly saturated with water, you can't have dry poop. It's not possible. So why do we feed peas and why do they magically work? Well, for a couple different reasons. Your fish food could be so old that it has lost all of its vitamin content, and maybe that pea is the first legitimate nutrition that fish has seen in a while. Or B, a lot of people confuse buoyancy disorders with constipation. So if you have a floaty little goldfish who's just so hungry all the time because either the water's warm, they have 5,000 of their closest friends in their tank, or they're just not enough food to go around. During feeding time, they're going to be gulping air at the surface. And that's going to end up in their GI tract and cause them to float, usually belly up, at the surface of their tank. You feed them a pea, this is a sinking diet, and air comes back out, fish is all normal again. If they are a bottom-sitting fish and just don't feel that well, peas have very, very low protein. I think it's about 2 grams per 100 grams. So by eating a lower protein diet, they're not going to be putting out as much ammonia into your system. And if you haven't cleaned your tank in a while, this could be a very good thing to let your biologic filtration fix itself. And then suddenly the problem is gone. Fish feels better, but it's not that pea. It's not constipation. It is a lot of different little things. So again, that is very common what we see with goldfish. So I actually had a case today of 2 Ryukin goldfish who are in a I believe it's almost a 50-gallon, I think it's just under 50-gallon tank. And both of them are positively buoyant, but they're able to maintain. So one is able to, kind of be in the middle of the water column. The other's stuck at the top, but they can get down to the bottom, especially during feeding time, which is important because, again, we want them to get down so they're not sucking in more air at the surface. Now, again, these fish have been having this buoyancy issue for a couple months now. So we went ahead and did some radiographs today. You knock the fish out, you zoink them so they can hold still on our table, and come to find out that their GI tracts were actually full of air, and they even had a little bit of air in their gills, which is not a good thing. So this could be a couple different problems. There is a lot of aeration in the tank with them, but the bubbles are usually a little bit too big to move into their gill tissue, into their vasculature, so that's into their vessels, their arteries and their veins, and that could be diffusing into their GI tract. But it's probably just them sucking in some excess air at the surface, which why certain goldfish want to do this more than others, I don't know. I really wish I could mind meld with a goldfish to get them to stop sucking air at the surface. So we are going to be trying to turn the air off for a little bit. Their filters should bring in more than enough air, but we're also going to be cutting off their contact with the surface with a little bit of bubble wrap. So again, that little floaty guy, if he's at the surface, he's not going to be able to suck in more air, and it will keep the top of him covered if he is floating at the surface. What's also important for them, since they do have this air primarily in their GI tract, is that we're going to increase their feedings through the day. So rather than getting 2 medium-sized meals per day, we're going to increase that to 4 small meals per day. And whenever the owner, walks by, gives them the cute little eyes, they can go ahead and throw them a couple peas to make sure that they are, getting a little bit of a sinking diet to keep that air moving. So again, those are for our lovely little fancy goldfish and their pseudo buoyancy disorders when it comes to food. We also get a lot of questions about feeding betta fish, about how often to feed them and how much and what food is best for them. Unfortunately, my biggest complaint with betta food is that it comes in this giant container that no betta could possibly eat in a reasonable time frame. If the container was actually a reasonable size for a betta, you probably never see it on the shelf. So a lot of betta are eating food that is 1 year, 2 years old, which again, we want to keep that at about 6 months. So unfortunately, you're probably better off eating cardboard than you are that food at that point. So again, we want to make sure that you're buying a new container of food about every 6 months or so. Understand that your betta will just not finish the container. There's no way to do that. So being tropical fish, bettas do best with a couple of small meals throughout the day. At least 2, 3 is fine, 4, sure, why not? And again, we don't have to feed them all their diet in 1, 2 meals. We want to kind of break it up throughout the day. So for our little betta fish, the pellet size is not standard at all. They are so many different sizes, but we recommend per meal or per 2 meals that you feed approximately enough pellets that would theoretically fit in 1 eyeball on a fish, not my eyeball. And that is approximately the amount of food that they should be able to eat. Now again, your betta might need a little more, might need a little less, depends on their environment, depends on their water temperature, and if they have any friends in the tank, that might make mealtime a little bit hard. So again, those are what we have for bettas. For our koi fish, what's most important when feeding them is that you take their water temperature into consideration. So again, koi are going to mostly be living outside. So their water temperature is really going to be based on the surrounding environment. Thankfully, they can tolerate a very wide range of temperatures, down to pretty much just before they freeze solid, all the way up to, high 80s is pushing it, 90s not for very long. Sometimes it depends on what they've just kind of grown accustomed to. But obviously within that temperature range, sometimes it's going to be too cold or too hot for them to really be hungry at all. And this is fine. They're just trying to exist in their environment. Trying to do digestion at that point is just not going to work. So, sure, fine. But within that little sweet spot, and we're talking, maybe 50, maybe 48 if your fish are really hungry, all the way up to, tapping into the high 70s, your fish's interest in their food is going to vary widely. So they might not be eating because it's too cold or too warm, or they might not be eating because they're sick and something's going on. But that's going to be determined by the water temperature. So very important that you have a thermometer in your pond that you can check on a regular basis, because that's what's most important for those outdoor koi. And I know they feed food seasonally for fish. The wheat germ diets are supposed to be more digestible in colder winter. They've done studies that prove that that is not the case whatsoever. At colder temperatures, carp species are able to digest wheat germ and fish protein at the same exact rate. So this is more of a marketing ploy than anything else. It happens in pet food. You do not have to switch up your fish's diet seasonally. And it is okay to feed them a little bit below 55 degrees. It really depends on the fish. But other studies have shown that a little bit of food throughout those colder months actually helps improve their immune system come spring when, they're being attacked by all those lovely little pathogens. So again, don't have to feed them their normal diet. You can feed them the same stuff you feed them all year round, just a little tiny bit. We're talking once, maybe twice a week. So those are my best recommendations for fish. And now if you have any specific questions, I would be happy to answer those for you. All right. Mainly be feeding pellets and frozen. Even the smaller fish get, yes, those super tiny pellets. Those did not exist when I was a kid. So I'm very glad they have those. Frozen diets are great as, just a little bit extra protein, a little bit extra fun in the diet. With a lot of these, kind of smaller tropicals that we don't have great data on, feeding a variety of foods is a really good idea because it just gives them, their guts, a little bit of everything to look for. And obviously, you don't have to feed your fish a pelleted or a commercially made diet. They have these for other pet species, kind of doing the create your own diet. What's most important with that is that you weigh everything. You can't just do like one shrimp, 1 cup of spinach, 1 cup of carrots. You really have to weigh everything out because these diets are going to be based on the weight of your ingredients. And it's going to be the weight of the ingredients dry, not wet, which can make things even more complicated if you are unfamiliar with these practices. You will have to add in different vitamins and not so much the minerals. A lot of fish get their mineral content from the water that they're swimming in, but it's important that you make sure that they have those vitamins for that. All right. Can you crush up vitamin C tablets for humans and add them to gel food or add them to the aquarium water? So unfortunately, the ones that they make for humans have some additional additives, especially binders, that do not make them ideal for fish. However, they do make, and I wonder if I still have a bag of it, an old bag. They make pure vitamin C powder from different supplement companies. And I'm happy to share the one that we have used in the past. And yes, you can absolutely mix that into their diet. Some fish don't like the taste of it. You can also mix it in with their water. So I have a wonderful colleague who is out of London. She runs London Aquatic Veterinary Services, Dr. Briney. And she came out and visited me for a week here in California and was sharing with me all the cool things that she does in her practice compared to mine. And she does have a lot of those vitamin C treatments as a supplemental treatment to a fish that is usually having some other health issue. So again, those kind of tablets that they have for people, probably not the best for your fish, but you can get the pure supplements. Just again, make sure you store it properly. Since it is a water-soluble vitamin, it probably will go bad pretty quickly if you are not making sure that it is completely airtight. If you're going to buy it in bulk, highly recommend you have a vacuum sealer for it because that will certainly increase the shelf life. Can plecos actually digest green beans properly? Properly is going to be probably not the best word. I'm going to say completely. And the answer is no. They cannot digest them completely. So again, plecostomuses, they are going to use those lovely little burly parts of their face to break up algae, to break up plant material. And that will be, again, they don't have an acidic stomach. It is going to basically just be absorbed. But their process of breaking down different materials is a little bit more efficient than the molars in the back of, say, a goldfish or a koi's mouth. So they can break up material into smaller pieces, which makes it easier for their digestion to be able to absorb it. So again, they are probably not going to be digesting all of those lovely little parts of the green beans, but they are going to be getting a lot more from it than some of the other species. So there's also a little bit of caveat with some of the diets that are available to the commercial market that this diet is for this species, this diet is for this species, and this one is to this one, and you can't mix them. You can feed whatever species diet. If it fits the nutritional profile of whatever species you're dealing with, you can absolutely feed it to a different species. We have recommended those lovely pleco wafers for goldfish, especially if you have some that are a little fast at the eating part. If you give them those bigger wafers, it'll take them a little bit longer to eat, which again gives them something else to do. It must not be fun being a goldfish. You got this one tank and it's your entire little world. If you got to play with your food a little bit, sure, go for it. I mean, cichlid pellets can go to goldfish, koi. It doesn't matter. It's all marketing. But yes, so again, digesting the whole green bean, not quite. It's more of a being able to crunch it up into smaller pieces. Yes, so vegetables, like lettuce, which doesn't really have any nutritional value for us, let alone fish. We have some fish that like kale, they like zucchini, some like carrots. When it comes to feeding vegetables and fruit, it's really important that you try to keep the sugar amounts down as much as possible. Some fish just don't like sugar, which is fine. Some other species like bananas, they like grapes, they like apricots, they like watermelon. And again, just like for us, on occasion at an appropriate temperature, sure, fine. They can have a little treat. But a lot of fish are not set up to correctly break down complex carbohydrates. And unfortunately, this can cause a buildup of glycogen in the liver, causing fatty liver disease. We can also see this with, again, high fat in the diet as well. And if your liver is full of fat, it doesn't really work the way that we need it to. So again, you're welcome to feed them some treats, but it is a treat. I'm probably not one to be talking considering the amount of Easter candy I've had this week, but it's going to be a treat. It's going to be an occasional fun thing for them. Again, mixing up their little world there. So please go ahead and feed them some treats. Again, like I said, we have another YouTube for that. Let me try to pull up some of our YouTubes that I've been mentioning. Just so, like I said, we have a longer webinar specifically looking at fish food labels. And then this is going to be the treats. So this is our treats for fish. And I have examples of everything except the silly little Cheetos that they have for koi. I mean, again, Cheetos aren't good for humans, let alone your fish, but they are fun once in a while. And they definitely, like having that interaction with their human friends. All right. And then this is going to be the nutrition label. Break down. And it goes into a little bit more depth, looking at a specific example of a standard fish food label with their nutrition breakdown, again, your percentages, your mins and maxes, and all of the ingredients. And trust me when I say you will need a dictionary, I needed a dictionary, or Google at least, to look up some of the different ingredients that are listed, again, by their scientific name. All right, so yes, someone says that they use romaine lettuce and a lot on the fry. Tends to grow biofilms and microorganisms quickly. Yes, I agree with that 100%. Again, a little bit of vegetable, not that bad. I'm not a big lettuce fan, considering it's mostly crunchy water. Your fish probably aren't getting much nutrition from it, but I'm sure they enjoy having something a little bit varied in their diet. So again, does anybody have any questions? For koi specifically, we do have one of our chapters in our new book that is specifically on koi food specifically, and it has a little chart on how much to feed for different temperatures. So we have another YouTube for that. I'm just going to link to that as well. So again, this just covers specifically koi food. On our website, we do have recommendations for different diets for the most common pet fish that we see. So this is bettas, goldfish, and koi. So if you want just the vet recommended one, we have those as well. So here we have our goldfish food. All right, awesome question. Do you find gelled foods like rapashi superior to dried pellets? Superior is a tricky word. Again, a lot of these diets come down to how they are stored. And for the gel diets, it's how it is processed and then stored afterwards. So I wouldn't really call them superior. Some fish just don't like the texture of pellets, which is fine. Some kids have problems with textures of different foods. But a lot of those diets I found, again, have the super high protein and the fat. And their instructions are not great at storage and proper. Again, you weigh out the amount. You put in, hopefully not too hot water. Obviously, you can disassociate some proteins if your water is too hot when you're mixing it in. And then, again, you're storing it in the fridge, usually uncovered. So again, you might have some vitamin loss from that as well. I put it down to a preference thing. Again, it's much easier to take food out of a can, pre-made, versus making the diet, but I'd call them pretty much equal. It really depends on your fish sometimes. The gel diets do tend to have a few more ingredients than the standard pellets. Again, some things you just can't keep in a pelleted form for a long term. But it really depends specifically on your fish and what your fish need and what you as an owner feel comfortable doing on a regular basis to keep your fish happy and eating. All right, and then this is going to be our beta diet. But yes, excellent question about the gel diets. We get a lot of questions about those. Yes, and we do have some concerns about overfed betas. So again, with beta diets and fish being overfed, it's usually coming down to your tank not being the correct temperature. So again, beta fish, tropical fish, they need the water to be warm for adequate digestion. So if you have them in this vase or this bowl with no heater, they're obviously going to have some metabolic issues. Also, an issue with beta is feeding them one meal, a big meal, one time a day. Because again, there's no stomach to hold food. It's basically an in the mouth and down. So if you've put all this food right up in the front of the belly, it's going to be hard for, again, they don't have big ropey intestines that are like squeezing the food down like we do. It's going to be harder for them to slowly move this giant essentially poo ball down the tract. So with those, it's important that the water temperature is appropriate and that you're feeding them smaller meals that are spaced out throughout the day. Yeah, we see a lot of bettas present for those little distended bellies. All right, how about live food, such as Daphnia? So again, this is going to be a treat. Daphnia really doesn't have a ton of overall nutrition. It's mostly just a crunchy exoskeleton. But if you are okay culturing live foods, again, that's another process on top of that. My senior honors thesis in college was actually on culturing Artemia or hatch brine nauplii. We were looking at their nutritional value right as they hatched to about the day or two after. And come to find that right after they hatch, they have the highest nutrition because they have their little yolk sac attached that hasn't been digested. This is food for the little nauplii freshly hatched form. So rather than waiting for them to get a little bit bigger and using up that yolk sac, it's actually a greater benefit to feed it right away, which is the case for a lot of the cultured products that we see. So again, if you are okay culturing live foods, again, separate step. That's going to be fun. Again, they're moving around, giving your fish something to do. I'm all for it. But it's not going to be the biggest part of their diet. Sure, it's crunchy. You got some protein in there, a little bit of fat. But again, it doesn't have to be all of the diet. But for these tropical fish, it's important to, again, diversify the diet as much as possible, which if you're okay putting the extra effort into live foods, I'm all for it. But just keep in mind that usually the older they get, they're going to start losing some nutrition over time unless you are actively feeding them yourself, which is usually either going to be a rotifer or some type of golden algae. Great questions. Thank you so much, everyone who's joining us live today. I really enjoy hearing what your concerns are about pet fish nutrition so we can provide more answers, look into different research opportunities, and be able to really kind of fill in some of these gaps that we're working with. All right, if your Daphnia culture has been a fishless tank for months, could they pass any pathogens? Yes, unfortunately, there's really no way to sterilize a system with live organisms in there. Obviously, the chance of them passing any parasites is going to be very low. Viruses, again, very low. Bacteria, maybe. The chances of them passing anything is very, very low. But passing anything at all, you can't. Biology just doesn't work that way. Yes, there may be no fish in there, so you don't have to worry about, our super big parasites, viruses. Again, we usually just don't test for a lot of these invertebrate species. I'm not an invertebrates expert. I do have one that I can talk to. He has been the one that has, been able to pass along that mycobacteria, which we see in bettas, guppies, and seahorses, is carried by shrimp and snails in the tank with them as well. So again, the chance of them actually carrying something pathogenic is very, very low, but it's not zero. That's just, it's going to have bacteria on them. They can't exist in a sterile environment. But good question. Yes, thank you. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone who tuned in today. Hopefully those resources will answer any questions that come up. Proper naming and identifying of tropical fish is a large concern. Yes, especially if they're small. More difficult to properly feed something that isn't correctly identified. Yes, I would say that certainly makes a difference. But if you know where that fish is from, you can probably get a pretty good idea of what other animals are in the environment, what other food sources might be available. So some of our tropical, saltwater species, if we're able to know kind of the neighborhood that they're in, again, it's not going to be exact. which is why having a variation and a diverse diet is really important. But yes, especially when they're small or there's a species that look almost like another species. And a lot of the times they like to rename things. Like, for example, koi got a new scientific name last year. Why? I don't know. But again, especially with these tropical species, I agree with you. It can be very hard to determine exactly what species you're dealing with. But if you know the environment that they're from, you're probably able to extrapolate from other species that live in that area what food sources could be available to your fish. But yes, I agree. That's a problem. And for a lot of these tropical species, like I said, there's no specific studies that were done on this one species. Thankfully, some of the bigger aquaculture species, we have information. So again, koi being common carp, that is a lot of translated there. And goldfish being crucian carp, there is a lot of overlap with them as well. All right, any last minute questions? All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Like I said, we have links now in the chat for our other webinars and a couple links on our website if you have some other questions about fish, pet fish nutrition. So thank you, everyone, and we wish you happy and healthy fishes, no matter what species they are, and hopefully they're all eating well. Have a good night.